Good morning, and welcome everybody. I'm really happy to be here and see such a full house. One of the advantages to coming here late last night, we're seeing there were a lot of parties going on in the lobby, so I'm happy that a lot of you made it. And then being up early this morning, I noticed an awful lot of moms strolling their babies and comforting their babies, so there were a lot of people who got no sleep last night. And welcome. This is going to be a really interesting session because we've got some of the top national leaders in the education reform movement sitting here in front of you, and they're all going to tell a little bit of their stories. Every single one of them one day was a brand new teacher sitting in a classroom, and like many of you, they decided that they wanted to go into teaching, or at least to try it as a way of impacting change. And the ways that they've grown from that are pretty extraordinary. They went from the classroom to becoming national leaders. So we're going to hear from them one at a time. We've got Julie Makuta, Michelle Rhee, John White, Dave Levin, and Mike Feinberg, all of them from various beginnings in Houston, Baltimore, New Jersey, Greater New Orleans. From the classroom, they have become leaders. Each one of them is going to talk, so I'd love you to take your seats. And first up is going to be Julie Makuta. One of the things that unites this group, aside from being TFA alumni, is they are trailblazers. They were the first to do many, many things, from starting a charter school network to becoming the first TFA member to become an elected board member, to starting various networks, to becoming the first to hold office. Also, what unites this group of leaders is their passion and their desire to do something that's really different and to come first. I'd like to introduce myself. Hopefully, thank you. My name is Liz Willen. I am the editor-in-chief of the Hechinger Report. We're a nonprofit, foundation-funded journalism news outlet. We cover education. Our stories appear all over the country, and many of these leaders have appeared on the pages, in our stories that appear in everywhere from the Atlantic to the New Orleans Times-Picayune to the New York Times to NPR. Some of them have taken a beating because when you're a trailblazer, you have to come first. And I am not a TFA alumni, but I have to say the other thing that I have in common with these folks is I happen to have hired several TFA alumni. Two of them are some of our best reporters, and they walked in to talk to me about what they wanted to do after TFA, and two of them became journalists because they were so passionate about what they saw in classrooms that they wanted to make a difference, and they decided that their vehicle to do so was journalism. I welcome that, and it's worked out wonderfully for us. Experience in the classroom turns out to be a tremendous asset to somebody covering education. With that, though, I'd like to turn this over to our leaders one at a time. First up is Julie Makuta. Julie came out of TFA in Greater New Orleans. And she's now head of a foundation. She runs the education aspect of a family foundation. She's done many things, including being the first elected school board member. She also used to play hoops, like three other of our TFA alumni who you'll hear from today.
Right.
Julie.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to add to the welcomes to Washington, D.C. Definitely one of my favorite cities, and a city where truly alums are making a difference every day in the lives of kids. Like Liz said, you're about to meet 5 trailblazers. We did what we did when we did it because we all just felt the need to act on our convictions. Is that better? Go ahead. There we go. So we all decided urgency ahead of other things and act on our convictions. As we start today with 15,000 people, I just want to take a pause. Like, put in the back of your head, what are you going to do differently because you're here today? What trail do you blaze? You know, last night at parties, I met somebody who was born the year I taught, 1991. That means we have earned our gray hair. And that means we get to dispense advice. So these are the three things I'm going to talk about today. The first is, to blaze trails, you have to have courage to go into the unknown. And the source of that courage, I believe, is knowing your why. Deeper than anything, what are you committed to? Is this okay?
Better.
Yeah. What are you committed to? What's at the foundation of your actions? The second thing is, trailblazers do not succeed alone. And the third thing is, you've got to stand up for what matters, especially when that is hard. So I'm going to start by sharing a little bit of my why. I grew up in Canton, Ohio. I went to a school called Canton McKinley. This is a school that knows what excellence is. Every year since 1973, we've had an alum play in the NBA. And every year, the NFL Football Hall of Fame game is played on our football field. And yet that excellence on the sports field does not translate into the classroom. Even today, check these stats and prep for this, just about 1 in 10 kids graduate college ready. It also has a race problem. In a school that's predominantly African American, now as it was when I was there were only white kids in my college prep classes. So I played hoops, as Liz mentioned, and like a few other of my teammates, got basketball scholarships. So I got a scholarship. I traded my knees for my Georgetown education. And while I was at Georgetown, I struggled at first, academically, to catch up. I was behind. And in that time, when I was struggling, I have to say, it became so crystal clear to me that the kids I had gone to school with, the kids I had played basketball with, were every bit as capable as the kids I was hanging out with at Georgetown. They simply did not have the same opportunities. So this is my why. Our country should not be a place where kids have better opportunities on the sports field than they do in the classroom. So on to the second part, this whole idea that trailblazers go alone. Such a false notion, right? And I'll just talk now a little bit about my campaign for office as an example of this. So it's back in 2000. I did not start the election season thinking that at the end, I would be an elected official. I was a science teacher and person helping to design the curriculum at a new startup charter school. But across the city, there was a lot of changes happening. The school board was being completely abolished and replaced with a new structure. So this meant that every single seat was open. It was an opportunity in the city. And a group of Teach for America alums and other young professionals in the education work and youth development work came together and said, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for some great things to happen so that DCPS can become the premier school system in the country. All we needed to do was recruit great candidates to the school board. So I'm gonna pause, right? When I hear say Kaya Henderson, everybody thinks Kaya Henderson. That was then, that is now. It was not then. We were ragtag. We were scrappy. We were teachers. We were people working in nonprofits and a few think tanks. We had no clout. We had no fancy titles, but we had a lot of passion. And so we hustled. We asked people, we recruited folks who were from the community leaders, people running organizations, if they would run for office. We said, we would be your campaign team if you run for office. And one by one, they said no. And it wasn't surprising then. The school board was cuckoo crazy. But they all said no. And the deadline was approaching for getting names on the ballot. And so there was this moment. That little crazy voice in my head said, if you are serious, if you're really serious about helping to make schools that serve kids like the ones you went to high school, get a great education, this is your time to step up. And so, thought about this for a while, and then about 2 miles up the street from here, I went into the Board of Elections, and pulled papers to file my name for the campaign. So suddenly we had a candidate. I was a bad candidate. I had such lousy name recognition that my last name, Makuta, some people thought it was Japanese, some people thought it was Greek, And the mayor thought I was African. Nobody knew me. We had 7 weeks to run a campaign. I didn't know a lick about politics. Not many people in our group knew much about politics. And in a city where people introduce themselves as I'm a 5th-generation Washingtonian or a 9th-generation Washingtonian, I lived here for less than 5 years. So we had some road to cover. But we had passion, and we had this commitment. We thought if a school board could be one in which there was strong and belief that with great teachers and great leaders, high expectation, more money at the classroom level, that the schools would be set on this trajectory to being great. And so we hustled. Every single night for those 7 weeks, folks like Kevin Huffman and Kaya Henderson and other folks who were in the Teach for America alumni community, and more people from the community just went out and knocked on doors, put up yard signs, did all the stuff that's not very sexy, but it is the heart and soul of campaigns. And we started to build momentum. We started to get some real community support. People knew us. There was this momentum going. So I just want to pause and say, how did I feel? Because I think you probably came in here as trailblazers, and maybe you have that crazy voice in your head too. So how did I feel at that moment? We are building a campaign that is getting momentum. I was terrified. It's one of the moments in my life where I've felt least sure of myself. In the most important interview for the entire campaign, the one where I was interviewed by the Washington Post editorial board for their endorsement, I walk out, kind of said, okay, that didn't go so well. I look down, and my skirt is on backwards. I just burst into tears. I thought, okay, I have screwed up so much more than my wardrobe today. But we won. We won in an 8-way race with nearly 50% of the vote. And just as importantly, we won in every single community in my district, which is a very diverse district. We won in the Hispanic community, the African American community, in Georgetown, in DuPont. We won in all the communities. And this was essential because I needed to be able to say, these are the people I represent, and we're all aiming in the same direction. So we won. So the next 4 years, I'll just say, were a very steep learning curve. We had 4 superintendents in 4 years, before Michelle Rhee became the bold chancellor that DCPS really needed. So I won't tell you many stories, but I'll tell you just one, real quick one. It goes back to this third point about standing up for what you believe in. Sometimes that was hard, right? I mean, it sounds great on paper, stand up for what you believe in, right? But sometimes it was hard. And there was a time when a city council member who had supported me in my election, and frankly, his support mattered, came to me and said, I want one of the school buildings that's unused to turn into condos. And we were deciding about what to do with this building. Either turn it into condos, or turn it over to the city, or give it to an after-school program, an adult education program run by a charter school. We're debating what we should do, and another board member comes over to me on the dais and says, Julie, you don't have to vote for the adult ed program. We have the votes. Yours doesn't really matter. It'll come back to haunt you when you're reelected. I voted my conscience, and I voted for it to be turned over to the adult ed program. By 10 a.m. the next day, that city council member had found another way to get the building out of our portfolio. It was in the city's portfolio. There's a big lock on it, and pretty soon it was on the real estate market. So sometimes I wondered, is what I'm doing matter? Does it matter? And I have to say, at times like this, I was very thankful to be on the board with the venerable civil rights leader named Roger Wilkins, who had been appointed by President Johnson as a federal prosecutor. He had won a Pulitzer for his journalism, so at 68, he had very little to prove. Yet he took an appointment to that board. And we talked about why that was. Here's what he said. He said, every day, I watch these beautiful children walk across the street and enter a building where I know their potential is going to be wasted and their future course set. I can't let that happen. I need to do something about it, so here I am. Here I am. Here we are. We have to be willing to go where it's uncomfortable, even when we're afraid and uncertain. There is no comfortable, easy path to social justice and equity. So here's what I charge you with. Listen to these trailblazers, think about folks today, write down what's inspiring to you, and then in your own head, step back and plot your own chart, your own path to a place where you will stand and say, here I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, wait.
Oh, I gotta ask a question. This is when I get grilled.
You're not going to get off that easy. Sorry. I want you to take us back to Greater New Orleans. You are a 20-something Teach for America. You're brand new in the classroom. Was there something that you saw in the classroom with the way the kids were being educated that led you to think that you needed to do something larger than be their teacher?
So, I think we've all been in classrooms where we think something is controlling the decisions that are resulting in what's happening in my classroom. Either the resources I have, my limitations to do X or Y, the fact that my kids really need math, but they only have 60 minutes of math, so why don't they get double periods, right? That there is something fundamentally broken in the systems in which teachers have to survive and do their craft. And that the systems, instead of working to boost those teachers and help to make them what I believe every teacher can be and wants to be, which is a great educator, the systems are often something that the teachers have to fight. And the job of teaching, as we all know, is so hard anyway. The last thing we need to do is fight the system. So yes, I think looking back, that's what I would say to that question.
Thanks, Julie.
Yep.
Appreciate it. We are now going to hear from another very well-known TFA alumni, and that is Michelle Rhee. She has been the chancellor in Washington, D.C. She has appeared on the cover of magazines with a broomstick. She has been a lightning rod for a lot of criticism, but she's also accomplished a great deal, from starting the New Teachers Network to her work in Washington and running Students First right now. And Michelle Rhee actually also started, like many of you, in front of a classroom in Baltimore. And she's going to tell you a little bit how she came to be where she is and who she is now from that experience. Welcome to Michelle Rhee.
Good morning. All right, so one of the best things about being called an Alumni Trailblazer is that you can excuse away all of the dumb things that you've done by saying that, hey, I was the first one to do it. So our charge was to, in 8 to 10 minutes, give you all of the lessons that we've learned in our jobs, which should be no problem, right? So I've decided I'm going to do that, or try to tell you as much about what I learned as my time as the DC Schools Chancellor with 3 stories, all right? So my first one is this. I came to DC in 2007, was appointed by Mayor Adrian Fenty, who was, by the way, the youngest mayor ever to be elected in the city. When he named me as the school's chancellor, the city pretty much went nuts because I was a 37-year-old Korean girl from Toledo, Ohio, who had never run a school, much less a school district. And we came in guns a-blazing. Our first few months in office, we were doing a ton of pretty revolutionary things that had never been done before. We were getting a lot of pushback. So one night, after a particularly hard day at the office, I was driving home. It's like 11 o'clock at night. It's raining outside. And my phone rings. My BlackBerry rings. Back then, we had BlackBerry still. And I look down at the phone, and it says Joel Klein. So I pull over to the side of the road. Now, one thing that you have to know is that Joel is the person who recommended me to Mayor Fenty for that he hire me for this job. And so when he saw me getting beat up every day, he felt really guilty about it, so he's just sort of protective. So I pick up the phone, and I said, "Yes, Chancellor." And he's like, "Hey, kiddo, how you doing?" I said, I'm good, I'm hanging in there. He's like, yeah, you hanging in there? I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And he's like, all right, I called to give you 2 pieces of advice. I said, okay, I'm ready. He said, the first one is, do you have a boyfriend? And I said, no, Chancellor, I do not. And he said, okay, so my first piece of advice is go and get yourself a man. Now, never in my entire career would I think that I would be taking love life advice from Joel Klein, but there I was. This is what he said to me. He said, this is the loneliest job that you could possibly have. He said, the only reason why I make it through every day is because at the end of the night, my wife will sidle up to me in bed and say, baby, you aren't the crazy one. They're the crazy ones. You're good. He's like, it's the only thing that helps me make it through every day. He said, so go get yourself a boyfriend. That's my first piece of advice. I said, great. He said, the second thing is you have to lead from the front. And he said it in such a definitive way, right, that I felt like, okay, I got it. And I hung up the phone, and then I realized, like, wait a second, I don't really know what that means. But I was kind of too embarrassed to ask him, right? It was actually not until several months later that we were going through an incredibly difficult process where we were making the central office employees at the district at-will employees, and we were getting all kinds of heat, that I realized what that meant. And basically what he was saying is when you're a leader, it's really easy to get mired in the muck of stuff. Sometimes you have to be able to see things before other people see them, and then you have to figure out how to get people to follow you into that. So lead from the front is my first lesson. Second lesson, you have to be okay with not being liked. Now trust me, because I'm really, really good at this one. So also early on in my tenure, in my first year in office, we made the decision to close 27 schools in the city, 15% of the schools across Washington, D.C. And people went nuts, right? Because if you very quickly want to become the least popular person in the city, all you have to do is say you're closing a school, much less 27 schools. So we announced that we were closing 27 schools. The city was sort of up in arms. My mother comes to town, right? A little Korean lady. She's like, oh, my daughter is the chancellor. She comes, she opens the Washington Post, the next morning. There is a 2-page spread pinpointing all 27 of the schools that have decided to close. She turns on the TV. There's there's footage of people yelling and screaming at me, at this meeting, throwing things. So that day I had a community meeting about one of the school closings, and I get home really late at night. And I'm in the kitchen making myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And my mother tiptoes in and she goes, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm okay, it's fine. She looks at me and she says, when you were a child, you never used to care about what people thought about you. She said, I always thought you were going to grow up to be antisocial, but I see now that this is serving you well. I said, yeah. About a year later, a writer at the Washington Post wrote a piece on me, and basically the theme of it was, I like Michelle Rhee. I think she's doing very good things for the city. I just think she should be a little nicer. So of course, that pissed me off. I call the guy. I'm like, what are you doing writing a piece like this? And he says, no, you don't understand. It's like, you're doing some of the things in the city that have needed to be done for so long. I want you to stay a long time, but I just don't think you're going to be able to make it unless you get a little nicer. So I said to him, here's the thing. You need to figure out what you think the most important characteristics of a school's chancellor are. And if you want warm and fuzzy, I am not your girl. But if you like what's going on and you think it's important for the city, then perhaps what you should be writing about not is, that I should get nicer, but more that the city needs to focus on the outcomes that we are producing for kids as opposed to the personalities that are involved. And mind you, let me just say as an aside that if I was a 50-year-old white guy, there is no way anybody would be saying that what I needed to do is get a little nicer. So you gotta be okay. You gotta be okay with not being liked. And then my third point is this. You always have to know what your North Star is. You always have to know why it is that you are in the job that you are. When Mayor Fenty appointed me to this office, he and I sort of took this on, and neither of us knew anything about running a school district. But what we promised each other was that we were always gonna do what we thought was right for kids and was gonna make the school system better and the city better. So we went along this journey together, and the best sort of illustration of how this man was always 100% true to this North Star was in August of 2010, right before he was running for re-election, and so right before the primary election. In August, we had just implemented the new teacher evaluation system, Impact, and we had gotten the information back that we had a few hundred teachers who had been rated ineffective on the evaluation and were slated to be terminated by the district. But the timing was not so great, right? So I called the mayor and I explained the situation. I said, okay, mayor, here's the deal. As you know, we've been implementing this new evaluation system. We've identified these people who are sort of not effective in the classroom, but I realize that we are weeks away from the primary, and so if this is not something we should do, like you give me the word, I'll make it happen. And he asked me, he said, well, he thought for a moment, and then he said to me, okay, I have a question. He said, if we make this decision, then will that mean that kids will have better teachers in the classroom in the new school year? And I said, yes. And he said, then we're gonna do it. He said, because making decisions based on the politics is a slippery slope. We're never gonna be able, there's never gonna be any end to that. He said, we've always done things based on what we thought was good and right for kids, and that's not gonna stop. So of course, people in the city were going nuts, because they're like, are you insane, right? And these are people who were our supporters. A few weeks before an election, you cannot terminate hundreds of people from the district. That is your death knell. But at the end of the day, we made the decision that we were right for kids, that was right for kids. And what I would say is that if we had more politicians in this country, like Adrian Fenty, who were willing to make decisions based on what they knew was right for kids, or what their North Star was, we would be much better off as a country. So at the end of the day, 3 lessons: lead from the front, don't be afraid to be disliked, and always have your North Star. And last but not least, important for Trailblazers, if you don't already have a mate, go out and find one.
Wait, you're not off that easy. Michelle, you said something that really struck me as someone who has spoken to hundreds of new teachers over the years, been in a lot of classrooms, had a niece who just graduated from TFA in New Orleans. A lot of the teachers that I speak to struggle with this concept of not being nice, not being liked. When you ask your kids how their day was at school, mine at least, how was your new teacher? She was really nice, or he was really nice. That's a hard lesson, when you're making it sound like it's very easy to not want to be liked. But if you're a new teacher and you're trying to gain the trust of all of these students, that's really difficult. I'm kind of curious how you developed that thick skin, and did it start in the classrooms of Baltimore and TFA? Did you then decide it was all right to not be liked, that you could help your students better by being either tougher or harder or harsher, more disciplined?
So this is a good question, and so for all of the folks out in the audience who are still in the classroom who may be struggling with this, let me give you this tidbit, which is interesting. When we were developing the teacher evaluation system here in DC, we we'd sort of gone through this incredibly long process, but one of my policies was that I would not introduce any big initiative or roll out any big initiative in the city until I got the feedback of kids. So I had this student cabinet, right, made up of kids from all the high schools across the city. And so when we were getting ready to roll out the teacher evaluation system, we brought it to the kids. They got a whole presentation on it, and the kids were like, wait a second, let me tell you what's missing. This is all nice and good. You got the test scores, you have the master teachers coming in and watching the teachers, but what you're not taking into account is what we think. And we see the teachers every day. Nobody knows better than we do. And I thought, okay, this was interesting. So we actually started this initiative driven by the kids to get student feedback as part of the teacher evaluation program. We just wanted to see what it was like. So the kids put together this entire survey that they would implement with their peers and that sort of thing. And the one thing that they said that they were afraid of before we did this was, I think that the knucklehead kids in my class are going to not rate the really effective teachers who happen to be strict or give us more homework. They're not going to rate them well because they don't get it. And so maybe that's why this system of having kids input isn't going to work. And what was interesting, once they got the data back, they actually found that not to be true at all. The students were very, very consistent, even when they had teachers who were incredibly tough, held super high standards, gave a lot of work, were very, very hardcore. All of the kids recognized that, appreciated that, and then rated those teachers more effective. So that's just something from the kids' perspective, is they're not always looking for a friend either. They got plenty of friends. They're looking for somebody to teach and lead them, and that doesn't always mean being nice.
All right, thank you. The next. Okay, our next speaker, John White, is going to come up now. Thank you, Michelle. John White is the superintendent of schools. He was one of the first alumni to lead state departments of education. The other person within a few months of him was Kevin Huffman in Tennessee. John started his TFA career teaching English in New Jersey. Like Michelle Rhee, he is also developed a thick skin as somewhat of the face of the reform movement in New Orleans. And his journey included lots of pit stops along the way. He was in New York City schools under Joel Klein, who we just saw a picture of. Did Joel also tell you to get a girlfriend? What he told Michelle?
I've gotten the same advice. Haven't necessarily taken it as well.
I was just curious if that was something he just said to women.
It's equal opportunity advice.
Okay. Just wanted to clear that up, John. So John has become a trailblazer in New Orleans, and where Hurricane Katrina caused a total revamp in many ways of the school system. And he is also someone who gets a fair amount of both praise and criticism, some of it in the Hechinger Report and in both national and local media. And his journey, he's going to tell us a little bit about that right now. John?
Thank you. It's great to be here, and good morning. I'll tell you just a little bit about myself so that it relates to what I want to share with you today as well. I actually grew up in Julie's district, in Michelle's school district. I grew up about 2 miles away from here. I went to the University of Virginia, wahoo-wah, wahoo-wah. And at UVA, I developed a love of writing. And my career was going to be going to New York and writing the great American novel by night, writing for a magazine by day, and I was going to do it, and this was the plan. And I had secured a job at one of America's great institutions of literary pursuit, and that is Maxim Magazine. And I was sitting there one night in my apartment thinking how fired up I was to go write these incredible pieces about, I had already submitted an interview with the Miami Dolphins cheerleaders to Maxim. I was working on a feature about a dude who took off his clothes and streaked Fenway Park. So, things were really on the up and up. But I was also writing a senior thesis, and my thesis was about a book called Go Down Moses by William Faulkner. And the book is largely about the failure of a protagonist to accept and to understand and to do something about the legacy of racism and the legacy of environmental degradation in the South. And I was reading a book of interviews that Faulkner gave while he was a teacher at UVA, which he was in his later years, and he kind of was asked about the meaning of this book, and he summarized it by saying the following. And this book was so complicated. I'd struggled for a year to try to figure this book out. And he said this. He said, well, there are people in any day and age who will struggle with the challenges of those times. They can't cope with it. There are three types of people. First, there are people who don't know there's a problem in the first place. Second, there are people who know there's a problem, but they choose to have nothing to do with it. And the character in this book was that. And third, there are people who say, this is a problem and I'm going to fix it. And then he said, in the final sentence of that interview, something that just rocked me as I thought about actually what I was going to go do. He said, we need people who say, this is a problem, I'm going to do something about it, I'm going to change it. And I heard that call and I applied to Teach for America the next day. The reason I share that story is that at the time, I thought that this was a kind of a moral calling. And I was going to step away from the world of cheerleaders and writing about Ferraris and all that stuff. And I was going to go do something and stand on the side of the morally righteous. And I still believe that. I believe that everybody in this room is engaged in the most morally righteous thing that we could do with our professional lives. But at the same time, over the years, I've come to see that, as Faulkner said, it's not just about being the kind of person who wants to change something. It's actually about figuring out what that something that you want to change is. And I do think there's a difference. There's a difference between being the kind of person who just says, I stand for change, and actually being the kind of person who works on the something that you're going to change. And as I look at Mike and Dave and Julie and Michelle and you, I'm so proud of standing with people who actually are engaged in the intellectual pursuit of what is the thing that will help us achieve our mission, what is the something that we actually want to do. I spent the last week, all 4 days of last week in North Louisiana. Anybody from Louisiana here, by the way? Yeah, all right. I was in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is up by Dallas, Texas. I was in Monroe, Louisiana, which is over by Vicksburg, Mississippi. I was also in some places you might not have heard of. I was in Winfield, Louisiana. I was in Ruston. I was in Bossier City. And I was in a place called Atlanta, Louisiana. We do have an Atlanta in Louisiana, it turns out. And I was talking to some people. I was talking to kids. I talked to a kid in a school that graduates 16 kids, a tiny little pre-K through 12 school in a rural community, graduates 16 kids. The kid is graduating with 3 AP college credits. And I sort of sat there and I said, gosh, we said that the something that we're going to change is about college access. And now years later, this kid in this rural community in the middle of nowhere has 3 AP credits that she's taken on to Louisiana Tech University. It's incredible. And I met another kid. She said she'd been out of school, she'd come back, she'd developed a passion for the craft trades and welding and carpentry, and she's earned an NCCER Level 2 certification in both welding and carpentry, which allows her to continue her education in community college and allows her to work at $40,000 a year next year right out of high school. I met 5 teachers who are still in college, but they are full-time residents. They are interns as members of a faculty in an elementary school, but actually still in college. And they told me about their incredible confidence that they've got coming into the first year of teaching because they've been apprentices, full-time residents in this program. And I thought, God, that is cool. I mean, we wanted to make that the something that we changed: college access, career access, teacher preparation, and it's actually changing. But I thought as I was driving back, it's about a 4-hour drive from Monroe to New Orleans, I thought as I was driving back about all the other stuff that I heard too. A bunch of somethings that I have never even begun to change. I thought about the superintendent's almost all of them in these little rural districts, who are still consumed with implementing desegregation orders that were put into place 50 years ago. By the way, a policy and a change that is underreported and has had an amazing effect on the rights of millions of children. But nevertheless, that is consuming these superintendents by making enrollment changes and moving principals around their districts because a federal judge tells them they have to do that. And I thought about, is this a distraction from the work of real racial and socioeconomic justice in the 21st century? I think it might be. I thought about those teachers, those 5 teachers who were in college sitting around that table, and I reflected on the fact that not one of them was African American in a state whose school system is 40% African American. And I thought about the fact that there's Grambling State University right down the road from where I was. And I thought about the state of HBCUs, publicly funded HBCUs in our state. And what is the long-term future of those systems? I thought about that kid coming out with the welding and carpentry credentials in an area where jobs are evaporating, a withering rural agrarian economy. And then I thought about the economy in New Orleans and how it's largely a service economy, an economy that, even though you may have a job, doesn't pay you a wage typically that is enough to disrupt the cycle of poverty. And what I realized is, for all of those somethings that I was so fired up about having changed or begun to change, there is a world out there of things that maybe even no one in this room is beginning to touch. See, I think that the hardest part of the work that all these folks are talking about, yes, I completely agree with what Julie and Michelle have said about courage and fearlessness. But you know, when a guy like a governor says that he's going to lower standards for academic learning in the second poorest state with the second lowest education outcomes in America, it's not a particularly difficult thing to say that is morally wrong. I think the harder part of my job, and probably yours, is having my own take and never changing that take on what it is that actually we need to be doing to get to a time of justice in this country. I think the greatest thing that education reform, that Teach for America, has done for this country doesn't lie in the brilliance of the policies of education reformers. I think it lies in the tens of thousands of people that are similarly committed to having an actual definition of what is that thing that should change, a definition that never stops evolving. But at the same time, I would tell you, I have a lot of conversations with a lot of people who are self-styled education reformers. And I think that the greater indictment of where we are right now is that if we asked many, many of those people, if you were given the keys to the ignition switch of the education system of this country and you were put in the driver's seat, what would be your plan? I think oftentimes many people wouldn't say they have a plan. And so if there's one thing I want to convey to you today, it's the challenge that I now realize that when I was sitting on that couch reading that interview by William Faulkner, that I realize now is the real substance of what he was saying, which is it's not just about being the kind of person who stands for what's right. It's not just about being morally righteous. It's actually about being the kind of person who works on having an answer to the question, what would you do? And who never stops changing the answer to that question. That is my hope for education reform in this country. That's my hope for Teach for America. That's what inspires me so much about being with you here today in Washington. And thanks so much for the chance to come talk.
You know, John, talking about having the courage of your convictions and believing in what's right and standing by it hasn't always been easy for you in Louisiana. You've had fights over the Common Core, you've had disagreements with the governor. But aside from that, you also face, in New Orleans at least, a largely minority school population, and you're a white man, face of reform, and there are people who resent you for that and challenge that. How do you balance taking into account the views of people who have lived in that city for very many years, who have their own ideas about what should be done with the school system, with your own coming in as an outsider and a white man, which has created some conflict and some criticism that's been aimed at you? Does that make you stop sometimes and think about your positions?
Well, let me say this about New Orleans. First, what the tragedy that befell New Orleans was in all respects a disaster and nothing that anybody would ever want brought on their community. But I think, as Michelle alluded to, there are times when disruption can be, in its own way, the right thing. And I think that the disruption in the public school system in New Orleans, given the opportunity, was the right thing.
But there are
At the
many
same
who disagree
time,
with
at
you.
this-
You
well,
understand
I don't
that?
know. I think generally there's broad agreement that the schools are headed in the right direction, and every piece of data on that says that. But the question is, what's the end game in New Orleans? The end game is not a guy from New York, from D.C., running the public school system from a state position. That's not the end game.
Right.
And so on one hand, you can acknowledge that the disruption was a necessary thing in order for a lot of lives to be changed, and you can celebrate that. But at the same time, you have to hope, as I said before, for the thing to evolve. It can't remain that way forever. And in New Orleans, therefore, you have to aspire, and when I talk to the principals, this is what we talk about, to a city that educates itself. You have to aspire to a city where the teachers in the system, where the principals in the system are the graduates of the high school and the colleges. And you have to acknowledge that in order to do that well, a lot more needs to happen, and it's even a lot more than just having a bunch of charter schools and an enrollment system. We've got to do a lot more. So I think the way you navigate it is be unapologetic about disruption where disruption is needed, but know that the end game has to be more than just the disruption itself.
How do you get to that end game? What steps are going to happen? What needs to happen?
Well, we're building a system from the ground up in New Orleans. I would say this. We have an incredible opportunity to re-envision what's possible there for our kids, but that means reimagining not just schooling through a system of charter schooling, but also the systems that surround schools, our early childhood system, our pathways to career, our wraparound services and alternative services, and the quality of the people leading our organizations in the school level and the district level. All of that has to continue to evolve. But if you lay out a long-term vision in conjunction with the community, you keep working at that over time, we'll get there. The disruption was worth it. That doesn't mean that's the end state itself. Thanks so
you.
much.
We could talk about this for a long time. Thanks. Thank you, John. The next speaker, I've heard him speak many times, and I want to recommend a book to all of you if you haven't read it already. It's called Work Hard, Be Nice, even though Michelle told you not to be nice all the time. It's a book written about the founders of KIPP, Dave Levin and Michael Feinberg, and what's great about that book is I really felt like I got to know both of them, and not only from their early days teaching in Houston at TFA, playing basketball with one another, drawing blood, almost killing each other, and from there, overcoming everything that they saw in those early days of TFA to form their own network of KIPP schools. It's been quite a journey. They're still, I think, buddies because they're sitting next to one another. I'm not sure. I don't know if they still play hoops together. But first, we're going to hear from Mike, who started in Houston, and he joined for Teach for America 5th grade. He was a bilingual teacher in Houston. He went on to found KIPP Academy in Houston, and it's been quite a journey. Mike? Dave, I'm sorry, excuse me. Dave.
I'm actually Dave. It happens all the time. We are still friends. The funny thing, Mike and I were reminiscing about the first speech we ever gave at TFA. We actually shared a suit. So we only had one suit between the two of us, and we had to change in between. So today we're not changing clothes, which is good. And I should say that just in fairness to Joel's gotten a lot of airtime today. He is equal opportunity because it's the first thing he asked me when I met him. Literally at a press conference. He's like, "Are you dating anyone?" I'm like, "Dude, we're about to go on stage." I'm like, "No." He's like, "Oh, you see that person out there?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So speaking of that, I met my wife speed dating. I'm going to talk a little bit about family. So yeah, and by the way, if you're single, I highly recommend speed dating. It's there's a no-lose proposition. My wife jokes I'm good in 6 minutes, but I'll leave it at that. So our wedding was like an un-PC joke, like a horribly un-PC joke. A black woman, a Jew, a rabbi, and a priest on a beach. And I love my family. I love my wife. I love my 2 sons, Max and Zach. I love our 2 dogs, Bubbles and Athena. My parents, my brother, my 2 sisters. And I love my family of choice, the Kipsters, some of who you're about to hear from. And my family's taught me everything I know about good teaching. They taught me about hope. They taught me about love. And they taught me about what Dr. King calls the creative synthesis of opposites. And like whenever you quote Dr. King, like I feel like I should take out a piece of paper because like I don't want to butcher the quote. So I want to do that because it is an amazing quote. And Dr. King said this: the strong person holds in a living blend strongly marked opposites. The idealists are usually not realistic, and the realists are not usually idealistic. The militant are not generally known to be passive, nor the passive to be militant. Seldom are the humble self-assertive or the self-assertive humble. But life at its best is a creative synthesis of opposites in fruitful harmony. The philosopher Hegel said that truth is found neither in the thesis nor the antithesis, but in the emergent synthesis which reconciles the two. That truth is found neither in the thesis nor the antithesis, but in the emergent synthesis which reconciles the two. And this creative synthesis of opposites has been the key to KIPP's success over the past 20 plus years. The creative synthesis of opposites. I mean, on some level, you could just start with Mike and me, but we'll save that for another day. But then you think about our work, and I'm going to build that from the ground of where Mike and I started, and where so many of us started, and where our hearts lie, which is in the classroom, because in some respects, everything starts and ends in the classroom. If we lose sight of that, then we lose sight of where kids go, because kids go to class, they come home and they talk about their teacher. They don't come home and talk about the chancellor. They don't come home and talk about the state superintendent. They don't come home and talk about Mike and me. They come home and they say, my teacher did X or didn't do Y. And so building up on the creative synthesis of opposites from the classroom, you think of things like joy and rigor. You think of things like head and heart. You think of things like success and struggle. And then we move from there. You think of things like the classroom and the whole school. The creative synthesis of opposites moves on, and you think about what is good for each individual child in the whole school. And then the fact that every other individual child might have opposite needs. And then you build from there and you say, the whole school and beyond. But because you cannot forget that the whole school exists in a culture of beyond. And finally, and Mike is going to pick up on this theme in a couple of minutes, you think about the need. You think about the need to be successful now, to getting it right now. We have to get it right now, like today, like Monday. We have to get it right now. And then the synthesis of opposites, that getting it right now can only be measured in what our kids grow up to do 5, 10, and 20 years from now. So the opposite of getting it right now is you have to get it right in the future. So why do I care so much about the creative synthesis of opposites? for a few reasons. Number one, the enemies of our collective work deal in absolutes. You hear it every day. There's no gray. There's no creative synthesis of opposite. Charters are bad. Testing is bad. Poor kids can't learn well because they're poor. The enemies of our work deal in absolutes. And yet, at the same time, the supporters of our work cease to be supporters when we deal in absolutes. All traditional schools are bad. The only solution is to blow up the public school districts. Life at its best is the creative synthesis of opposites. One that I did not include, but is apropos because it got some play today, is the opposite of being nice and being aggressive. The creative synthesis of opposites. One more opposite, and then I'm going to close on a personal story about one day, because we were asked to share about our hope for one day. One more opposite is the opposite of little hard and big hard. So, one of my sisters is working on curing cancer. She's got the brains of the operation. Joel always said that one of my sisters got the brains and I got the BS of the operation. So, but he was actually talking about my other sister. So my sisters are really both very smart. So is my brother. Anyhow, little hard and big hard. It turns out curing cancer is little hard. Big hard is actually having cancer. It turns out that reforming education is little hard. Big hard is being condemned to go to schools in which you have no chance of future options by the zip code in which you were born into. Little hard are the struggles we all have as teachers, as principals, as district leaders, as parents. Big hard are the kids who have no choice. And so what's my hope for one day? My hope for one day, I'm going to go back to family. My son was born February 18th, I hope I don't get this wrong, 2009. At the same time, there was a young woman who had a kid in the room next to us. She cried the whole night. And my wife was like, why don't you go talk to her? I'm like, what do you mean, why don't I go talk to her? I'm like, this is weird. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? She's like, you're good at that, just go in there and talk to her. I'm like, okay, I go in and talk to her. And turns out that she lived across from one of the KIPP schools in Harlem. And she was 18, and she was like all alone, and she was crying, and the social workers, it was a long night. I mean, having a kid, by the way, is a long night in the first place. And she was alone. And so my wife's like, go be with her. I'm like, but you're alone. She's like, yeah, it's all right. I think she wanted to just get rid of me. So anyhow, I went in there, and I have no idea what actually happened to this child. But I do know that tragically, both of us left Mount Sinai and went about 3/4 of a mile home. One of us turned left out of the hospital, and one of us turned right. And this story plays out in virtually every city in America. It is not up to the kid which way they go home out of the hospital. And yet, whether you go right or whether you go left determines so much about your life right now in this country. If you go right in New York City and travel 3/4 of a mile, your chances, your statistical chances of graduating from college are like 8 to 10%. And if you go left, it's like 80 to 90%. So my kid's probably going to graduate from college. And I hope hers does too. But it shouldn't be left to a flip of a coin on which way you go out of the hospital at a couple of days old. And why do I have hope? And why do I believe in the creative synthesis of opposites? Because of all the people here today. And all the people here this weekend. And the folks who aren't here who are engaged in this work, who are engaged in this work for a long time before any of us came to this work. So that one day, it doesn't matter which way you leave the hospital. It doesn't matter what zip code you grow up in. You will have the opportunity to build a better tomorrow for yourself and us all. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. You know, I've heard Mike and Dave speak so many times at so many different events, and it's very interesting because I really sort of neglected to let you know just how many awards these guys have won, and the strengths of their accomplishments in KIPP are really amazing. And like I said, reading that book, Work Hard, Be Nice, told me so much because I had been in KIPP schools many times. If any of you haven't, I highly recommend you go. It's somewhat mystifying when you go in and you hear the chanting and you see the uniforms and you see the way things are run. But that book helped me understand how, from your earliest days in Houston at TFA, you faced this equity issue that you're really hitting upon now. And that is the key to our work in education at the Hechinger Report, and it is really the key to so many things in education, is understanding the vast inequities. I want you now to take us back to those early days and help us understand how your philosophies emerged from what you saw in the classrooms there and the kind of students that you were dealing with, which your Ivy League background really had not prepared you for in the slightest.
Yes, that's true. I was a horrible teacher. In fact, I kept having to remind myself, although Mike reminded me often, like, I really felt so bad for my kids that first year. I had to remind myself if there was anyone better, I wouldn't be there. But actually, there is an absolute. When you think about the creative synthesis of opposites, there is only one absolute that I've become convinced of in the last 20 some odd years, and the absolute is this. And honestly, there, this is the best introduction that I can give for Mike, because the only absolute I think any of us would agree on is that the promises we make to children are sacred. And Mike, more than anyone else I know, has kept those promises since day one. And in order to keep those promises, so when you think back to the beginning, think about those opposites. Like, you got to end the he said, she said. You got to end, like, I went into the faculty lounge at my school, and there was a bet about whether or not I would make it to Thanksgiving. I literally took the under, but I was the only, white male teacher. I was the only male teacher. I was the only white teacher in our school, and people ask me what it was. Well, ultimately what it was is the ability to connect to kids comes from someplace inside all of us. And the problem with first year new teachers, I think, is, how do you actually express that level? Like, how do you show what's inside you without seeming weak? And so, I'll give you an example. The worst piece of advice that new teachers get is what? Don't smile at Christmas. Because if you don't smile at Christmas, you pretty much condemn your class to be in a miserable place. And yet, the reason they give you that advice is because if you do smile too often, like, the kids could run all over you, presumably, although it doesn't really matter. So I think what we learned early on, and what I think has been the key to success, and you're going to hear that today from the two Kipsters, is that we've gotten so many things wrong over the years, but the only thing we got right, and the reason that our college graduation rate is north of 50%, is because we promised 9-year-olds, and now we promise 3-year-olds, that we will be with them to and through college and beyond. And we've kept that promise. So we've gotten better at teaching math, we got better at teaching reading, we get better at running schools, but ultimately, we haven't gotten better at keeping promises because we kept them from the beginning. And our public school systems, John is trying to change that, Michelle is trying to change that, we're all trying to change that. They don't keep promises. They don't think about like who our kids are going to be when they're 30. What are you, 32 now? Like they don't think about who our kids are going to be when they're 32. They worry about, are they going to pass this test? Are they going to, graduate? All of which is super important. But we set out a different goal, and that's what we still are working to, is who are our kids going to be when they're in 8th grade, 12th grade, and when they're in their 30s.
And yet one of your philosophies with working with these kids is you do want them to be nice. Do you have a take on what Michelle thinks about how you as teachers should be role models for being nice or not?
Michelle's like one of the nicest people on the planet. So it's sort of like, it's just convenient that it's all like, so in the reality, the best thing I think the best line on this I've ever heard is from someone who was one of the original KIPP staff members. He's here this weekend, Darryl Cobb. And he says, like, you want to raise kids to be respectful revolutionaries. And in order to be respectful revolutionaries, you have to know when it's appropriate to be nice and when it's appropriate to stand firm. Those things are, that's a creative synthesis of opposites. I think it's a false thing that we have to yell, or we have to, like, that just doesn't work, though there's a time for that. And so, yes, I think it's super important to be nice, but like the idea that niceness and weakness are synonymous is crazy. Like the fact that somehow in our country, we've gotten to the point where niceness is synonymous with weakness is like crazy. I think I just said that. So yes.
So you can be nice, you can be tough, you can make a difference, you can change, you can help solve the achievement gap, you can get more kids to go to college.
Of course, because ultimately that's what our kids need. So, we have 7,000 college-age alums today. We are going to have 40,000 college-age alums in 2020. We have 70,000 kids in our school. And like when you look at what it takes to be successful, one of the keys is building a social network. And like, truth be told, you can't build a social network if you're a jerk. And so like there's stories of like, people say, well, look at Steve Jobs. Okay, but look at Steve Jobs. Like how many Steve Jobs are there? It's like, and it didn't totally, like it's a false narrative. And so, I think you have to be tough to do the work we do. And at the same time, I think Michelle said it right. You have to be tough. You don't care what other people think about you, but the people who know you actually do know that you're kind. And so there's a difference, again, between the people who know you and the public perception of the work you do. And at the end of the day, you really can't care about too much of what that perception is, because the only thing that matters is what happens to the kids we work with. And if the kids you work with think you're a jerk, you're doing something wrong. That I can tell you right now, right? So if the kids you work with think you're a jerk, you're doing something wrong. But I think, that's not been our case.
Great, thank you so much. Now we're going to hear from Mike, who may challenge what Dave said, may agree, may disagree, may challenge him to a game of hoops afterwards. But you've been partners in this endeavor for a very, very long time. Became trailblazers together.
Right.
Let's hear your story.
Well, I'm glad you mixed up Dave and me, given hairstyles that hasn't happened in a really long time. So maybe I do have hope in the next hoop game. We'll see. I was thinking about just the title of our time together here, the path to one day in our lifetimes. And thinking about that, it would be nice if we did hit one day in our lifetimes. It would really suck if we all died in this room and we weren't at one day yet. Would it be nice if we could just simply schedule it on our outlooks for like next Thursday? But it's not going to work that way, and this is where we get into the fruitful opposites and that Dave was talking about, and the tension that Julie and Michelle and John and Dave all talked about the work and the sense of urgency today, and yet this aiming it at one day. And the work is hard, without a doubt. And we all know the benefits of following Jim Collins' lessons on doing the 20-mile daily march. Jim Collins wrote about the fact that you know where you're going, you have this one-day vision, but then you put your head down and you go 20 miles. And then you go 20 miles. And then you go 20 miles. It doesn't matter if it's raining or sunshine or whatever, just 20 miles every day. If you can go further, don't worry about it. Make it 20 miles every day. don't be the hare, be the tortoise, and go slow and steady, win the race. And we know the virtue in that lesson, but when we have as far to go as we have in 1990 and still have to go today despite progress that's been made, it doesn't make that 20-mile journey any less difficult physically or mentally. The journey is hard for us as teachers and school leaders, and certainly hard for our children growing up today in the underserved communities. But there's truth in Jim Collins' advice, and I actually was talking about this with Ronnie Pierre-Antoine, who's a TFA alum from the Bay Area. When in the 90s, last month we were in Haiti on a Notre Dame ACE mission trip, looking at some of the Holy Cross Order ACE schools in Haiti and talking with Teach for Haiti as they're getting going too. So quick shout out to the Bay Area, shout out to Teach for All. Good stuff out there. And as we were talking with him about this, he said, you know, Mike, there's a Haitian proverb that's so much in line with that. And he taught to me, it's P-E-T-I, Ziwazo, Fe Mishni. Sorry, my Creole's a little rusty, so is my Spanish. And that means little by little, the bird builds its nest. And so Jim Collins has it right, the Haitians have it right. What are we doing to think about doing this daily march? And there are successes in those 20-mile daily marches to give us confidence and faith to keep going. Despite our youth and the fact that in the early 90s, we all thought that this one day would be finished in like 7 or 8 years. We've been making progress, and the biggest challenge is not out there to keep going, it's in this room and inside each and every one of us. Do we have the strength, courage, and faith to stay the course, knowing each day gets us only a little bit closer to one day? I'm going to share with you what's kept me going on this journey so long. I do think about one day, but I also think about the milestones we hit on the path to one day. After 16 years, or 5,840 daily marches, after I started as a first-year Corps member in a 5th grade classroom back in 1992, I got to watch Yasmin Chavira, one of my original Kipsters, start her first day as a TFA Corps member. Let me put up Yasmin right there. Whoop. There's Yasmin on the left. That's supposed to be one picture at a time. So that the one there on the left with me, that's Yasmin way back in the day. And she got, 9 years ago, she started her first day as a TFA Corps member and KIP teacher. That was 9 years ago, and 3,285 more daily marches with Yasmin still in the classroom today. Here's a picture of Yasmin with one of her Kipsters that she started working with, Amy Jagisar. And I'm going to have Yasmin come up here and talk about this continuum of doing these daily marches. Yasmin, come join me up here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Feinberg. Yes, I'm a 32-year-old veteran teacher who still refers to her middle school mentor as Mr. Feinberg. Feinberg, have I ever told you why I call you that? Let me tell you now in front of all these people. I do it out of deep respect and gratitude. Mr. Feinberg helped me climb the academic mountain by pushing me to work hard and be nice. But to be honest, that was a pretty easy climb for me. I've had really fortunate to have a great mom who always valued education and being respectful. But he also helped me climb a much tougher mountain. It's a political mountain that I, to this day, see some of my own students struggling to climb. So let me tell you guys a secret. I crossed the border illegally when I was 6 years old with my mom, so don't tell Trump. All right? It's between the many of you and me now. We were pretty tough, my mom and I, but we weren't ready for the obstacles that we encountered on the path when I started applying for private high schools after having an opportunity to go to KIP as a middle schooler. As an undocumented student, it didn't matter if I had the grades or the character. What mattered was my family's lack of money and my status, which denied me the financial aid that would have made these opportunities possible. Yet, without hesitating, Feinberg came to my house, spoke, kind of yelled at my parents, helped us find a lawyer, and made sure I received a high-quality education. I attended a really great private high school in Houston and was able to get my paperwork by the time I went off to college. Without his help, that literally wouldn't have happened. But that's why I call him Feinberg. And the example he set for me is why I teach. As I was reaping the benefits of his guidance, I A terrifying thought would like creep into my head every now and then. There's only one Feinberg and one Levin. There's just one of them. I see that every day. And that was frightening to me as I realized like 65,000 undocumented students are graduating from high school each year. 65,000. But there's only one Feinberg and one Levin. Who's gonna help them? So by sophomore year of college, I knew I'm not gonna sit idly by with these thoughts. I can't do it. So I decided to follow in his footsteps, and I became a second-generation Teach for America Corps member. Still here. I teach still because I believe that I can make a difference and help one student at a time. When I see our high school students, they come by school all the time, and they're really excited right now, heading off to college. It keeps me going. This year was a really special one for me. My first class of 5th graders graduated this year. That's the first class I taught as a first-year Corps member in New York City in the South Bronx. They just graduated this year. They're all off to college. And one of those students is Amy Jagisar. She is headed off to RPI this year, and she's doing really, really amazing things. Friends, please welcome who keeps me going, Amy Jagisar.
Hi guys, yeah, as you can see, my best photo ever being taken. So I'm a child of 2 immigrants from Trinidad who didn't go to college. Yeah, Trinidad over there. Woo. And so people will label me as a first-gen kid, but honestly, I didn't have the struggles that everybody thought I would have. Yeah, my parents didn't go to college, but that didn't stop them from believing that education is key in life. I was constantly enforced with the idea that people could take away everything from you. The one thing that they can't take away from you is your education. And for them, they didn't, like, as I said, they didn't go to college, but they had a similar experience coming to the US from Trinidad because essentially both of them, both college and the journey to the US are both a shot in the dark, not knowing what the outcome would be. But even with that fear in the back of their head, like, not knowing what was gonna happen when they come to this new country, this new journey, a new life, they still took the opportunity. So I think for them, that inspiration and that motivation to come and start a new journey, to start a new life, that gave me a jump start to actually go to college and get a better education, get a better life for myself. And with my parents, I also had great role models like Ms. Shavera. Even when I was a little 5th grader, she enforced the ideas and she showed me the ropes that not only is education key for yourself, but it's also key for others as well. You can use your education not only to help yourself in the future, but to help all the people around you. And to that day, I still follow that idea. And for me, Ms. Shavera was a great role model and such a secure role model, knowing she was a former Kipster as well. So she showed me, like, yeah, it's gonna be tough. Like, nobody said it was gonna be easy going to and through college, but she did it, I can do it too. She made me believe in myself more than I ever thought I could, and having people like her and my parents and just having that great support and trust throughout my entire life helped me give me that boost to further my education. And I'm doing that now by going to RPI, and right now I'm actually studying biomedical engineering, and I'm hoping I can make a change in the future with that by either creating prosthetics, artificial limbs, or just simply inspiring somebody else to do the same thing I'm doing and help others. That little inspiration, that little glimpse of hope you could give somebody is the best thing that you could give them, because it gives them that little boost, that little push to tell them, like, hey, you can do this. Like, everybody could be telling you, no, you can't do this. Like, sit down, like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a girl, you can't be an engineer. Like, what are you talking about? No, you can do it. Like, I've had people telling me, like, you're a minority, you're a girl, like, you can't do things. Like, nobody's expecting you to do anything great in life. Don't listen to them. Please don't listen to them. Do what you want to do. Have that one person who tells you you can't do it. Have that one person who's telling you you can do it, just listen to them. Even if everybody else is bringing you down, let that one person telling you you can do it, just listen to them. And by listening to them and by listening to people like Mr. Vera, my parents, and everybody else, and it helped me to believe that I could help other people in the future, and now hopefully this is how I'm building a better tomorrow, by inspiring others. And friends, please welcome back the people, my friends, my teachers, the people who keep me going, Mr. Vera and Mr. Feinberg.
Thank you, sweetie. So, what keeps us going? No, stay up here, guys. Stay up here. No, stay up here. So what keeps us going is math, and this is the math, right? There's roughly 300 of us in the original KIPP school, and I used to as Gary Rubenstein knows, who's been teaching for 25 years in a math classroom, you get the kids to learn a lot of math really fast, and I got them to be able to do a lot of mental math. And so I would ask them, if all 300 of you in this middle school, if each of you grow up and each of you help 300 kids in the future, how many is that? They know that's 90,000. And if 90,000 grow up and they each help 300 kids, that's 27 million. And 27 million each grow up and help 300 kids, that's 8.1 billion. So in 3 generations, we fix the planet, right? And that's how we get to one day. So we had it easy. I just had to do 300. So, you know, Yasmin's got the pressure on for 90,000, and Amy, good luck with that 27 million, right? And I'm gonna close with reading a little bit of the poem that Dave read 23 years ago at the TFA Summer Institute when he was wearing my suit. It's a poem by Langston Hughes, Freedom's Plow, and you know I sign my emails, plow on, and this is what I think about every day to keep going. And I'm just gonna read we're out of time, we'll read the last stanza here. A long time ago, enslaved people heading toward freedom made up a song. Keep your hand on the plow, hold on. The plow plowed a new furrow across the field of history. Into that furrow, the freedom seed was dropped. From that seed, a tree grew, is growing, will ever grow. That tree is for everybody, for all America, for all the world. May its branches spread and shelter grow until all races and all peoples know its shade. Keep your hand on the plow, hold on. Thank you, everyone.
Mike, one question. Thank you. Wait. I have one final question for you, Mike. It's very interesting what you said, Jasmine. There is just one Feinberg, one Levin. Apparently I mixed them up earlier, and I'm sorry about that. But my question to you is, looking out on this audience, there's only one of you guys, but you did a lot from your TFA roots in Houston. What charge do you have to this next generation of TFAers to blaze the kind of trails that you did to kind of make the kind of differences that you're making?
There's only one Feinberg and one Levin, but there's only one of everyone in this room, and everyone is going to, clap for that. Everyone is going to be able to step up and do their share. And what I think the other thing that keeps me going, as you see, is the fact that Yasmin here is a much, much better teacher than I ever was. And there's so many people in this room, and so it's the progress we keep making. We're not reinventing the wheel every single year, just spinning ourselves. It's, again, we're not going to get there in any given week, in any given month, in any given year. That's where we're going to be able to celebrate we're hitting it, but we're making that progress, and we are getting better. And you think about just mindsets and teaching, and I mean, the first year of KIPP was all about those, you talk about those chants, right? I mean, we were rolling our math multiplication tables and chanting "Read, baby, read," and there's still an element of that that's joy and fun, but my God, that's not the curriculum anymore, right? We are college prep, and you don't college prep by rolling your threes every morning. So we're making progress as we're getting better at this, and we're getting bigger and better, and that's what we have to keep our eye on, that prize.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you to our amazing panelists. I hope you heard their great stories today.